Okay, so now we've got this great web application framework, but we still haven't seen anything, right? Haven't put any working parts, no form fields. So let's do that next. So we're going to add a gizmo to our dashboard in this next step, and we're going to use the same tools we've used in the prior three steps. So I'm going to come over to my application. Here's my freeform demonstration. Here's my dashboard. Dashboard's going to be a container of gizmos and some other things. We'll get to that in a bit. And I'm going to use the same features that I used before. So I've got my new item list, and now I can see what I can put in a dashboard. This might be a little bit different than what I can put in a page or what I could put in the navigation section of the site. And one of the most common things I'm going to add to a dashboard is a thing called a gizmo. Now, keep in mind, there's all sorts of content elements here. So a dashboard is a collection of content still. It's no different than any other content container on the site, but it does support a new content element called a gizmo. So let's create our first gizmo. So to do that, I'm going to select gizmo from the new item list, select the create button, and then I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do. What am I going to call this thing? So just like our naming standard for dashboards, we have a naming standard for gizmos, and you can use your own, but this will come in really handy down the road. So I'll explain why later. So I'm going to call this gname. So I'm going to collect a username, right? And then I need to do something with it. So without configuring the gizmo is completely useless. So I have to decide what type of gizmo it's going to be. So if I look at the selection list, I'm going to see a lot of things here. And we're not going to cover all these today, but we are going to cover some basic things. So these are all categorized by the type of gizmo they are. So there's button gizmos and credit card gizmos and debugging gizmos, so on and so forth. What I want is an input gizmo, because that's going to give us the best visual and show you how things actually work within a freeform application. And my name is going to be a simple string. So I'm going to select string, and then I'm going to click load. So what load does, that loads up the gizmo configuration. And when it returns here, I'll have a set of options that are applicable for an input string. So for my string, I'm going to say this is a required field. I'm going to enter a name, like name. Right? So this is going to be the label that's going to be on my gizmo. And then I can do other things here. So I can set up placeholder text if I want to. I can set up a default value. If I want to initialize it with some value, I can tell the gizmo when I want to reload on some other activity. So gizmos can talk to one another and they can broadcast events. So this reload option will come in useful later. Or I can actually wire it to a values gizmo that has a collection of all sorts of values and say, you know, this gizmo, whenever I update it, it automatically updates this other gizmo. We'll talk about that a bit later as well. But for now, I'm just going to make these simple changes. So I set the required attribute and added a label, and I'm going to save my gizmo. So as soon as I do that and I go back to my application, you'll see that I've got one gizmo in my application. I can return to my form, and I can refresh my page. Now, I want to point out a couple things here. I've got a required attribute on this field, but also the label is on top of the field. Now, if you remember earlier when we set up the dashboard, we set up the grid configuration on the dashboard to have a 24-column grid with 24 columns for each item in the grid. I have one item in my dashboard. It's going to take up 24 columns, and this 100% actually causes my gizmo label to stack on top because these are two parts. I've got a label and I've got a field, both grid elements inside a grid. All right, so we'll come back to that again later, but now we can just test our application. So I'll put in my name, Craig Sumner, and you see as I type, the field is no longer required. If I back out and get rid of it, it's a required field. So that's it for adding a gizmo to a dashboard. Simple and easy.